Hello, and welcome back to another evening together. Tonight we're doing something I've been quietly planning for a while now, and I'm quite pleased we finally got to it. We're going to go through 100 theories about Dexter, not plot summaries, not episode rankings, not a list of the show's best kills or worst decisions, theories, the things fans have spent years arguing about in comment sections and Reddit threads and late-night conversations that start with, okay, but what if? And end somewhere completely unexpected. Now, before we get into it, I want to be clear about what kind of theories we're dealing with. Some of these are backed by things the show confirms, more or less. Some of them are observations that the writers never acknowledge, but that fit so well with what's on screen that you'd have a hard time calling them wrong. And some of them are the kind of fan speculation that makes you stare at the ceiling afterwards, wondering why you'd never thought about it that way before. A mix is what I'm saying, a good mix. What tonight is not is a recap. I'm going to assume you've watched Dexter, probably more than once. I'm also going to assume you've got opinions about it, about the finale, about which season was best, about whether Harry deserved what he got, about all of it. We're not starting from scratch here. We're picking up a conversation that began somewhere around your second or third rewatch, when you started noticing the things underneath the things. I should also mention, if you haven't already subscribed and you enjoy this kind of long, slow, detail-heavy companion content, it would mean quite a lot if you did. These videos take a proper amount of time to put together, and knowing there are people who actually want to fall asleep to someone rambling affectionately about Dexter Morgan makes it all feel worthwhile. But no pressure. Get comfortable first. That's the main thing. So, 100 theories, we'll move through them in loose thematic clusters, starting with Dexter's psychology and the nature of the Dark Passenger, then working through Harry's code, the villains, Deborah, the investigations, the rituals and symbols, the domestic life, New Blood, the prequel, and finally the big picture stuff at the end. The theories that aren't really about plot at all, but about what the show has always been trying to say. If you fall asleep somewhere around theory 30 or 40, honestly, that's the whole point of this. I'll be right here when you wake up. And if you make it all the way to 100, well, that's its own achievement. Let's get into it. Let's start with the thing that sits at the center of everything, the Dark Passenger. The phrase Dexter uses to describe the urge to kill, the compulsion, whatever it is that lives in him and has done since he was a small child in a blood-soaked shipping container. 8 seasons of the original show, plus New Blood, plus Original Sin, and the franchise still hasn't quite decided what the Dark Passenger actually is. And I think that's worth sitting with before we go anywhere else. Theory 1. The Dark Passenger is not a separate entity. It's Dexter's mechanism for denying moral responsibility. The show eventually says this out loud in season 7, and it's one of the most interesting moments in the whole run. Dexter has an internal conversation with Harry's ghost, and he says, almost in a panic, "If there's no Dark Passenger, then I'm responsible for everything I've done." That's the line. That's the whole theory, stated plainly in the dialogue. The Dark Passenger is a story Dexter tells himself, not a lie exactly, something more complicated than that. It's the narrative architecture he built or was given to explain why he does what he does without having to own it completely. The passenger drives, he just holds the wheel, and the show knows it, and lets it sit in the background across the whole run while Dexter goes on believing in the thing anyway. Because the alternative, full moral accountability, no passenger, just a man making choices, is too much to hold. I find that more frightening than any kill room. The idea that the monster is just the man and the man knows it and builds a mythology around himself so he doesn't have to say so. Theory 2. Dexter isn't a psychopath in the clinical sense, and the show uses that word loosely. Psychopathy in clinical literature involves a fairly specific cluster of traits. Shallow affect, no genuine attachment, no remorse, predatory behavior with complete emotional detachment. Dexter is described as a psychopath by Vogel, by Harry, by the show's general framing, and yet he grieves Rita. He panics when Harrison is in danger. He feels something when he kills Jonathan Farrow and discovers afterwards that Farrow was innocent, something that looks a lot like guilt. He loves Deborah genuinely and completely in his own disordered way. What Dexter actually presents as is something closer to complex trauma with dissociative features, possibly with elements of alexithymia, difficulty identifying and describing emotional states, rather than their absence. He feels things, he just doesn't have the internal language for them. Vogel calls him one of a kind, which the show presents as a compliment, but which reads, if you're paying attention, as an admission that the diagnostic category doesn't quite fit. Psychopath was the word they had available. It's not quite the right word. The show knows this, it just never corrects the record. Theory 3. Harry created the mask, not the man. And somewhere inside the performance, something genuine grew. The code teaches Dexter to present as normal, to mimic the social responses of a functional adult human, to say the right things, do the right things, keep the job and the friendships and the girlfriend in the boat. And Dexter performs this so thoroughly for so long that the performance starts to become something else. The want to be normal, which he voices constantly in the early seasons, evolves into something that looks like actually wanting the things that come with it. Rita, the kids, breakfasts, the boat on the weekend. You can argue that this is still just a more sophisticated performance. And yet, I'm not sure that argument holds completely. I think somewhere in the mimicry, real preference developed, real attachment. The mask fit so well it changed the face underneath it, which is either hopeful or deeply strange, depending on how you look at it. Theory 4. The concept of the dark passenger was invented by a 12-year-old boy who had no other way to describe what he was feeling. According to a revealing exchange in season 7, Harry let it slip that Dexter was about 12 years old when he first coined the phrase. Harry let it go because he couldn't figure out how to correct it without making Dexter feel worse. So the child built a mythological explanation for his own psychology, and the adults around him nodded along and nobody ever updated the framework. Dexter spent his entire adult life navigating a mental model of himself that he constructed at age 12 in the aftermath of extreme childhood trauma with no therapeutic support whatsoever. And we wonder why the code has holes in it. Theory 5. Harry's training may have amplified the urge to kill, not just redirected it. This is the one Harry's ghost never engages with honestly. The argument that the code saved Dexter, redirected what might have been random, unchecked violence towards something with a moral structure is the show's foundational premise. But by teaching Dexter to plan, to research, to stalk, to ritualize, to anticipate, Harry turned a trauma response into a practiced skill set. He didn't redirect a tendency, he professionalized it. In any real clinical context, the approach would be considered catastrophically irresponsible. You don't manage violent ideation by giving it a procedural framework and a uniform. You don't contain it by making it more efficient. Harry made Dexter better at killing, then called it harm reduction. I've always had mixed feelings about how the show handles this. The show tends to present Harry as a tragic hero making a desperate choice. The evidence suggests he was also someone who made Dexter more dangerous than he needed to be, and never quite had to reckon with that. Theory 6. The blood slides are not trophies in the serial killer sense. They're the closest thing Dexter has to a journal. Most trophy keeping in criminological literature involves objects taken for re-stimulation, something to return to relive the experience, to fuel the next urge. That's not what the blood slides feel like. Dexter doesn't seem to revisit them for that purpose. He keeps one drop from most of his planned kills, a minimal, almost bureaucratic record, proof that it happened, that the kill was real, that it mattered, and he was there. It's closer to record keeping than trophy taking, and psychopaths, in the strict clinical sense, don't typically need proof that things happened. Dexter, who claims to feel nothing, apparently needs quite a lot of it. Theory 7. Brian M.O.E. Zier is the version of Dexter that Harry wasn't there to shape, and the ice truck killer Irk is the show's argument for nurture over nature. Both brothers were in the shipping container, same night, same trauma, same blood, Dexter got Harry, Brian got the foster care system. The ice truck killer case is disturbing in the specific way that it forces you to see what Dexter might have been without direction, not necessarily more violent, but uncontained, externalizing everything, making the interior visible. Brian couldn't keep the inside on the inside. Dexter, trained by Harry to maintain a surface, buried it so deep that even he couldn't always find it. The show kills Brian in the season 1 finale, and Dexter feels almost nothing, which is either proof of psychopathy or proof of something more complicated, a man severing the version of himself he was most afraid of. I lean toward the second reading. Theory 8. The show suggests, fairly consistently, that Dexter experiences something like joy during the kill ritual. And this is the most honest and most uncomfortable thing it does. The preparation phase, the research, the surveillance, the moment of confrontation produces visible relief in Dexter. Not sadistic pleasure in any obvious way, something quieter. The tension releases, he becomes more himself, whatever himself means. The show never quite frames this as a good thing, but it also doesn't look away from it. Dexter's happiest moments are not the domestic ones. The domestic ones are where he's most human. But the kill ritual is where he's most himself. And the show lets those two facts sit beside each other without resolving the tension between them. Theory 9. Harry's hallucination gradually shifts from external guidance to internal permission. And this shift tracks exactly with Dexter's moral decline. Early Harry, seasons 1 through 4, pushes back as Dexter's externalized inner voice. He questions Dexter's decisions, he expresses concern, he introduces doubt. Later Harry, seasons 6 through 8, is increasingly a rubber stamp. He validates, he agrees, he helps Dexter find justifications rather than interrogating them. The ghost changes because Dexter changes. He's not accessing some preserved version of his father. He's constructing the father he needs in the moment he needs him. And what he needs later is permission rather than guidance. The ghost is no longer a mentor, it's a permission structure he built from a dead man's face. Theory 10. The show's choice to replace Harry with Deb as Dexter's hallucination in New Blood is a retroactive admission that the wrong ghost was in charge all along. Harry represented the code, the rationalization, the framework, the organized permission structure. Deb represents consequence. She appears in New Blood wounded, frustrated, clear-eyed, and she does not give Dexter permission to do anything. She reminds him of what his existence costs. She asks questions Harry never asked. She refuses to let him believe the mythology. If the show had given Dexter Deb's voice in his head from the beginning, the voice of consequence rather than the voice of strategy, things might have gone quite differently. New Blood seems to know this. It's a quiet acknowledgement, never stated outright. But the choice of who occupies that internal space is the show's clearest statement about what Dexter always actually needed. Since we're on the subject of Harry, and since the code is really his invention more than Dexter's, whatever Dexter might believe about it, let's spend a while with Harry Morgan himself. Because the more you look at him, the more complicated he becomes. Harry Morgan is one of the most interesting presences in the show, precisely because he's almost never there. He died before the series began, technically of heart disease, as the official story goes, though we'll get to what actually happened in a moment. He exists almost entirely in flashback and hallucination, which means we only ever see him filtered through Dexter's memory or Dexter's need. And yet the code he left behind shapes every single thing that happens across 8 seasons and beyond. That's a remarkable amount of influence for a man we never really meet. Theory 11. Harry didn't create the code out of love. He created it out of guilt. His affair with Laura Moe Zare, Dexter's biological mother, whom Harry used as a confidential informant, placed her in the path of Hector Estrada's cartel. She was murdered in a shipping container. Her children, Dexter and Brian, watched it happen. Harry was directly, causally responsible for the circumstances that created the trauma that made Dexter what he became. The code isn't paternal love finding an unconventional form. It's a police officer managing his own culpability by redirecting the damage he caused. It's penance disguised as parenting, and the show is somewhat cagey about stating this directly, but never lets you fully forget it either. Theory 12. Harry's decision not to retrieve Brian M.O.E. Zur from the foster care system is the show's most under-examined sin. Harry saved Dexter. He left Brian, 2 boys, same night, same shipping container, same mother dismembered in front of them. Harry looked at both children and chose one. The show never quite reckons with this properly. Brian became the ice truck killer, a killer who targeted women and drained their blood, and eventually came looking for his brother because what else do you do when the only person who could possibly understand what happened to you is your sibling, and you haven't seen him in 30 years? Brian didn't become the ice truck killer in spite of his circumstances. He became the ice truck killer because of them, and Harry is where the circumstances start. In any real parallel life, one where Harry chose differently, or retrieved both boys, or handed them both to someone equipped to help, you have to wonder what Brian M.O.E. Zur could have been. Theory 13. Harry committed suicide after watching Dexter dismember a body with visible satisfaction. The code worked, and seeing it work destroyed him. The show reveals this in Season 2, confirmed by Matthews, and later by the flashback itself. Harry didn't die of heart disease. He overdosed on his heart medication shortly after walking in on Dexter and seeing not a disturbed boy struggling with dark urges, but a composed man who had found his natural habitat. The code was designed to contain something dangerous. What Harry saw was something at home. He could live with the theory of what he'd built. He couldn't live with the reality. There's something deeply sad about that. Harry spent years convinced he was doing the right thing. And then he watched the right thing in action, and it killed him. Not because it was wrong, because it was exactly as right as he designed it to be. Theory 14. Matthews knowing and choosing to protect Dexter across the series is the show's darkest institutional critique. Deputy Chief Matthews knew. He knew Dexter was connected to the Bay Harbor butcher case. He knew about the M.O.E. Zur family history. He knew enough to put it together, and he strongly discouraged and politically undermined the investigation when Lagverta brought it to him. His reasoning, Harry was a good man, I won't let his legacy be destroyed, is precisely how institutions protect their own in real life. Not through conspiracy exactly, through the quiet application of authority to inconvenient truths. The code's greatest protection was never Dexter's cleverness. It was the loyalty of men with careers and reputations and old friendships to protect. In any real police department, this is exactly how it would work, and the show is quite honest about it. Theory 15. Harry's hallucination appearances follow a pattern of gradual withdrawal across the seasons. He appears frequently in seasons 1 through 3, present, opinionated, challenging. By season 5 and 6, he shows up less often. By season 8, Vogel, a woman Harry knew but Dexter barely did until now, has effectively replaced him as Dexter's guide figure. The show is quietly tracing Dexter's separation from his father's influence, and the vacuum that creates is precisely what Vogel and then the brain surgeon rush into. Harry's diminishment is structural, not accidental. Dexter's becoming his own man, which is both progress and catastrophe. Theory 16. The code has always had a fatal, unfixable flaw. It has no mechanism for error. When Dexter kills Jonathan Farrow in season 4, the photographer who he's convinced is a murderer who turns out not to be, the code offers nothing. No correction, no consequence internal to the system. No procedure for what happens when the evidence was wrong. Harry designed the code to help Dexter channel his need to kill and avoid getting caught. He didn't design it to prevent Dexter from being wrong. Those are two different problems, and the show is quietly clear that the code only solved one of them. Theory 17. Harry's insistence that Dexter can never tell anyone about his true nature was not wisdom. It was a guarantee of isolation. The first rule, effectively, no one can know. Every relationship Dexter enters is structurally incomplete because of this rule. He can be intimate but never honest. He can be present but never known. Rita loved a version of him that was real and also incomplete. Deb loved him completely and was destroyed by the completion. Harry didn't teach Dexter to survive. He taught Dexter to be alone. That's what the code produces at its core, a man in a room with no door. Theory 18. Dr. Vogel's revelation in Season 8 retroactively makes Harry a more culpable figure, not a more tragic one. The framing the show gives Harry a devoted adoptive father improvising under impossible circumstances, trying to save a child he loved. It softens when you learn that he was working under the guidance of a neuropsychiatrist who was conducting research into psychopathy. Harry wasn't a father finding an unconventional solution. He was a participant in a clinical experiment on a child. The code wasn't born from fatherly instinct. It was designed by a professional for professional reasons with Dexter as the subject. To be fair to Harry and to the show, Vogel makes clear that Harry did love Dexter. The care was real. But the framework around it was a great deal more calculated than the flashbacks make it look. Theory 19. Original Sin confirms that Harry was making the code up as he went. There was no plan. The prequel series, set in 1991, shows us Dexter transitioning from student to avenging serial killer under Harry's guidance. The code isn't a coherent system that Harry delivered fully formed. It emerged through trial and error, under pressure, in the context of Harry's own guilt, and grief and professional exposure. Dexter spent his entire adult life following a set of rules that were improvised under emotional duress by a man with a secret over several years, in consultation with a researcher who had her own agenda. Not exactly the foundation it appears to be. Theory 20. The real Harry Morgan, not the ghost, not the flashback, but the actual man, is unknowable. And that unknowability is load-bearing. Every account we have of Harry comes through someone who needed him to be something specific. Dexter needed him to be a wise father who made a hard but loving choice. Matthews needed him to be a good cop worth protecting. Vogel needed him to be a co-investigator who validated her theories. The flashbacks are Dexter's memories, which means they're filtered through Dexter's psychology. We never see Harry plain. We never see him without a narrator who needed him. And that means the code Dexter follows is based on an incomplete picture of a man who may have been quite different from the mentor Dexter built in his absence. The show never resolves this. I think it's the right call. Some foundations shouldn't be fully examined. But let's move away from Harry for a while, because one of the most interesting things the show does, especially in the middle seasons, is use each season's main villain as a kind of mirror for Dexter, a different reflection of what he is or what he might become. And when you look at them all together, they form a remarkably coherent argument. One of the things the show does best, and it doesn't always get credit for this, is structure its seasonal antagonists not just as obstacles or threats, but as philosophical challenges. Each big bad forces Dexter to confront a specific version of what he could be, or what he is, or what the code produces when it breaks down, or gets copied, or gets handed to someone without the same internal architecture. Let's go through them. Theory 21. Brian M.O.E. Zier is the Dexter who didn't get Harry. And killing him is the hardest thing Dexter does in 8 years, for reasons he can't articulate. The ice truck killer arc works as horror, as mystery, as character study. But it works most deeply as a thought experiment. What does trauma produce without structure? Brian is not more violent than Dexter. He's not even necessarily more damaged. He's just uncontained. He externalizes. He makes art from the interior. He can't keep the inside on the inside, and he doesn't particularly want to. The ice truck killer's crime scenes, bloodless, pristine, posed, are a kind of communication, addressed specifically to a brother he'd been looking for since childhood. Dexter kills him in the season 1 finale and feels essentially nothing, which the show presents as proof of his condition, but I think it might be something else. I think Brian scared Dexter in a way that nothing else in the show quite does. Not because Brian was monstrous, because Brian was recognizable. Theory 22. Leela Tournay is the only character who accepts Dexter completely and without condition, and the show codes her as a villain for it. Lila sees the dark passenger and doesn't flinch. She doesn't want to help Dexter manage it or suppress it or redirect it. She wants to burn with him. She's attracted specifically to the darkness, and she accepts it as part of him rather than as something to be fixed. The show codes this as pathology, as obsession, as dangerous. And yes, Lila does increasingly unhinged things. The false rape accusation against Batista, the murder of Dokes in the Everglades cabin. She's not a safe person, but here's the thing. The specific quality she offers, unconditional acceptance of what Dexter actually is the thing Dexter spends the next 6 seasons looking for from other people. Rita's love was conditional on the performance. Deb's love was conditional on the secret being kept. Lila's love had no conditions, which is precisely what made it unsustainable. The show punishes the only character who loved Dexter honestly, which is a choice. Theory 23. Arthur Mitchell, the Trinity Killer, is what Dexter would have become if he'd tried to build a family without the code to contain the rest of it. Trinity had a ritual. He had a double life. He maintained a family facade for decades, volunteered at charities, kept a respectable job. He was, on the surface, everything the code teaches Dexter to perform. And underneath, the 4-kill cycle, the annual rotation across cities, the specific geography of his own family's deaths. The difference between Dexter and Trinity isn't the violence, it's the containment. The code holds Dexter's darkness in a separate compartment from his domestic life. Arthur Mitchell had no such compartment. The darkness seeped through everything. His family lived in a house of controlled violence and called it normal because what else could they call it? Theory 24. Arthur Mitchell's 4-step ritual, bathtub, building, bludgeoning, buried boy directly mirrors his family's actual deaths in biographical order. The show reveals this gradually across season 4, and it remains one of the most elegantly constructed villain backstories in the series. Arthur isn't just killing, he's repeating. His sister drowned, his mother jumped from a building, his father beat him, and Arthur, as a boy, witnessed it all starting the cycle. Every Trinity kill is a reenactment of something that happened to him. The ritual isn't about power or dominance or the pleasure of it. It's compulsive revisitation of an origin wound that never healed. This makes Trinity the most psychologically coherent villain in the show, not the most menacing, though John Lithgow is extraordinary in the role, but the most legible. Once you know the key, he's trapped in a loop. The loop happens to involve murder, but the underlying structure is something a lot of human beings would recognize if they're honest about the loops they live in. Theory 25. Miguel Prado's death is the show's argument that the code cannot be transferred. It only works through Dexter's specific psychology. Season 3 is underrated, I think, partly because it's doing something quite precise. Dexter tries to let someone in, genuinely in, knowing the truth and participating. Miguel Prado learns about Dexter, responds with enthusiasm, and immediately begins using the code for personal revenge. He kills a woman who crossed him politically. He uses the framework of justified killing to sanction something that is nothing of the sort. The code breaks in his hands within a matter of weeks. The argument is clear. The code is not a portable ethical system. It's a highly specific instrument calibrated to one person's psychology, history, and internal architecture. Given to someone else, it becomes what every moral framework becomes when separated from the moral instincts that generated it, a tool for rationalization. Dexter kills Miguel. The code survives. But you can't help feeling the show is noting something. The the code was always fragile. It only ever held because of the specific person holding it. Theory 26. The Doomsday Killer arc is the weakest season precisely because Travis Marshall has no real mirror relationship with Dexter. Seasons 1 through 4 work because each villain reflects something about Dexter specifically: biological family, psychological acceptance and containment, domestic life. Travis Marshall doesn't. He's a religious zealot with a trauma-induced codependent relationship with a hallucinated authority figure, which is thematically adjacent to Dexter's relationship with Harry as Ghost. But the show never draws that connection explicitly, and Travis's fixation on biblical prophecy gives him no meaningful personal parallel with what Dexter is experiencing in Season 6. The villain and the protagonist are operating in completely separate thematic registers. And yet the season contains some of the show's most visually arresting sequences: the tableau murders, the angel of death with the collar mechanism, which makes it a frustrating watch because the production ambition runs well ahead of the narrative coherence. Theory 27. Geller being a hallucination is the season's only truly interesting idea, and it's interesting precisely because it should parallel the Harry situation. And the show almost sees this, but not quite. Professor Geller, revealed mid-season to be a hallucinated authority figure in Travis's head, is structurally identical to Harry as Ghost in Dexter's. Both men are following the instructions of a dead or absent father figure constructed by their own psychology. Both mistake internal permission for external authority. The parallel is right there, and the show gestures toward it. The episode in which the parallel is most legible is one of Season 6's better hours. But it never commits to the connection. It never says, here is what Dexter and Travis share. And missing that connection is why the season ultimately doesn't achieve what it was trying to do. Theory 28. Isaac Sierko is the most underrated antagonist in the series, and the show discards him too quickly. A Ukrainian mob enforcer motivated not by power or money but by grief. He loved the man Dexter killed, and he has the intelligence and composure to nearly close in on Dexter in a way no other villain manages with such minimal fuss. Ray Stevenson plays him with a particular kind of settled danger. He's not performing menace, he is menace at rest. There's a theory that Sierko was originally intended to survive the season and continue into Season 7, that the writers wrote themselves into a corner by making him too compelling to resolve quickly and killed him off because they didn't know what to do with him next. I don't know if that's true, but the speed with which he exits does feel like a creative retreat. Theory 29. Jordan Chase and the Barrel Girls' ring in Season 5 represents the show's exploration of group psychopathy, and Lumen Pierce is the season's actual protagonist. Season 5 is more interesting than it gets credit for. Dexter grieving Rita is handled with real care. And Lumen Pierce, a survivor who forms a vigilante partnership with Dexter to track the men who abused her, shifts the moral weight of the season considerably. Lumen has a dark passenger of her own, temporarily. Her urge for vengeance is real and specific and rooted in genuine trauma. The season asks whether Dexter's partnership with someone in that state is helpful or exploitative, and it doesn't give a clean answer. Julia Stiles does excellent work in a role that required her to be simultaneously vulnerable and formidable. Theory 30. Oliver Saxon, the brain surgeon, is the most nihilistic villain in the franchise because he has no code at all. He's not even the opposite of Dexter. He's the absence. The brain surgeon is Vogel's supposed to be dead psychopathic son, the one the framework failed, the one the code couldn't shape. Where Dexter has an elaborate internal architecture of justification, Saxon has nothing, no philosophy, no ritual with meaning, no pattern except destruction. He's not a dark mirror for Dexter. He's what Dexter would be if you removed everything Harry and Vogel built, the raw material before any structure was applied. And that, possibly, is why he's the least interesting villain to think about after the fact, even if he's effectively threatening on screen. A blank isn't something you can engage with philosophically. He's the show's one admission that sometimes there's nothing underneath. Now, we've been talking about the antagonists. Let's talk about the character who is, by any honest accounting, the show's true heart, Deborah Morgan. Because I think the case can be made, and I'm gonna make it, that Deb is the show's real protagonist. Dexter is who we follow. Deb is the one who changes. Jennifer Carpenter's performance across the original series is, I'll just say it plainly, the most underappreciated work in the series. Michael C. Hall is extraordinary, nobody disputes that. But Hall had the advantage of playing a character the show consistently treats with care, whose interiority is given the full weight of narration and flashback and the best writing the room could produce. Carpenter played the person the show used as a pressure gauge. Pour stress in, watch what comes out. And what came out consistently was something more complicated and more human than the character as written sometimes deserved. Theory 31. Deborah Morgan is the show's true protagonist. Dexter is who we follow. Deb is the one who changes. Character arcs require change, genuine transformation, not a return to baseline after disruption, but a shift in who the character fundamentally is. Dexter's arc across the original series is a loop. He encounters something that disturbs the equilibrium, adapts, reestablishes equilibrium, then does it again. He learns. He doesn't transform. Deb transforms completely. She begins as an ambitious vice cop with bad taste in men and a complicated relationship with her father's legacy. She ends as a broken woman who has compromised her morality, her career, her sense of self, and eventually her life, to protect a man she couldn't save and couldn't condemn. That's a complete arc. It's an arc the show treats as secondary, which is one of its genuinely questionable creative decisions. Theory 32. The romantic feelings Deb develops for Dexter serve a specific structural purpose. They make her final choice completely irreducible. Season 6 features a dream sequence in which Deb realizes she has romantic feelings for Dexter, which she begins to process with a therapist in Season 6. This was the show's most controversial story choice. Deb and Dexter are adoptive siblings. The fans were not thrilled. And yet the choice makes a particular kind of narrative sense if you think about what the show was setting up for the Season 7 finale. When Deb shoots La Huerta to save Dexter, the moment has to be irreducible. It can't be just family loyalty, because family loyalty has limits that we can imagine. It can't be a rational calculation, because there is no rational calculation that produces this outcome. It has to be the totality of who she is and what she feels. The romantic dimension, uncomfortable as it is, ensures that. The show was building toward a moment where it needed Deb to be completely ensnared, and it was quite methodical about it. Theory 33. Deb shooting La Huerta is the real ending of the original series. Everything in Season 8 is aftermath. The Season 7 finale is where the show completes its central argument. The argument being, Dexter's secret will eventually cost someone else everything they are. Dokes lost his reputation and his life. La Huerta loses her life pursuing the truth. And Deb, the person who loved Dexter most and longest, loses her soul. She pulls the trigger on an innocent woman, a colleague, a person she respected to protect her brother. After that moment, there is no version of Deb that comes back intact. Season 8 is watching the damage spread. The brain tumor, the alcoholism, the self-destruction. It's not a character arc, it's a reckoning. Theory 34. Deb's drinking and disintegration in Season 8 directly mirrors Harry's psychological spiral before his suicide. Harry saw what Dexter actually was, saw the code working in practice, and it destroyed him. He killed himself shortly thereafter, unable to carry the knowledge. Deb sees the same thing, carries it differently for longer, and it destroys her by degrees. The parallel is deliberate. Both people loved Dexter with the full weight of who they were. Both were broken by the knowledge of what they'd loved. The show draws the line quietly. No character ever says, "You're becoming Harry." But the structural echo is unmistakable once you see it. Theory 35. Frank Lundy's return in Season 4 was the writers closing the last exit Deb had available to her. Lundy and Deb in Season 2 was the healthiest relationship she ever had on the show. A man who respected her as a detective, who found her genuinely interesting, who was emotionally stable in ways her other partners were conspicuously not. They reconnected in Season 4 with real warmth. The conversation about why he'd stayed away, why he thought she'd move on from him. And then he was shot, not in a dramatically orchestrated way, in a parking lot, casually by someone pursuing a separate agenda. The show killed the exit. After Lundy, there's no version of Deb that moves away from Dexter. Quinn is complicated and ultimately peripheral. Her career becomes an extension of proximity to Dexter rather than a path away from him. Lundy's death closed the last door, and I think the Season 4 writers knew exactly what they were doing. Theory 36. Deb never wanted to turn Dexter in. From the moment of discovery, what she wants is for him to be safe, and that want is what destroys her. Season 7 is structured as Deb processing the revelation, the stages of grief, almost, denial, then horror, then attempts at control, then a kind of resigned complicity. But look at what she actually does at each stage. She doesn't go to Batista, she doesn't call Lundy, she manages the crime scene, she builds the alibi. From the first night, she's already protecting him, even while she's telling herself she's deciding what to do. The choice was made the moment she walked into the church. She just needed the rest of the season to catch up to it. Theory 37. The discovery moment, Deb walking into the church at the end of Season 6, was likely planned as early as Season 4, possibly earlier. The show had been moving Deb toward this revelation for several seasons. Her investigative instincts, which grow sharper every year, her increasing proximity to cases that touch Dexter's work, the moments where she almost connects the dots. There's a production theory that the showrunners had a general shape for this moment from around Season 4 or 5, and that several storylines in Season 6 that feel like they're killing time, including Travis Marshall's entire arc, are effectively runway for that final shot. Whether or not that's precisely true, the discovery moment feels earned in a way that only deliberate, long-game structuring can produce. Theory 38. Jennifer Carpenter's performance across Seasons 7 and 8 is some of the best acting in the entire franchise, and it's largely uncelebrated because the material around her in Season 8 collapses. The brain surgeon arc is generally considered the weakest of the show's final runs. The Vogel storyline doesn't fully land. The season is distracted and somewhat rushed, and Carpenter is in the middle of all of it, playing a woman disintegrating in slow motion with complete honesty and zero self-pity. The performance is remarkable. The context makes it hard to see clearly. It's worth a dedicated rewatch, specifically watching Carpenter and nothing else. Tracking the arc of a person learning that knowing the worst thing about someone you love doesn't free you. It traps you differently. Theory 39. Deb's last appearance as Dexter's hallucination in New Blood, frustrated, wounded, telling him the truth even when he doesn't want it, is the show redeeming something it broke in Season 8. The original series finale dispatches Deb with what feels like insufficient weight. She dies in a hospital. Dexter disconnects her life support and buries her at sea. It's handled with grief, but not enough time. New Blood corrects for this, partly, by giving Deb's presence in Dexter's psychology the prominence it always deserved. She's there constantly. She's not gentle, she doesn't offer comfort, she offers clarity, which is more useful and less comfortable. That's the Deb the show needed all along, not a supporting character in Dexter's story, but a presence in his conscience that refuses to be managed. Theory 40. The real parallel in New Blood isn't Dexter and Harrison, it's Deb and Harrison. both damaged by proximity to Dexter, both faced with the same fundamental question about whether to stay or go. Deb spent her entire adult life choosing to stay in Dexter's orbit, and it destroyed her. Harrison, who grew up without his father, who tracked him down across a decade, who wanted to know and understand him, faces the same decision in compressed form over one season. And Harrison makes a different choice. He doesn't protect Dexter. He doesn't absorb the cost. He acts. And the contrast between what Deb did and what Harrison does is the show's argument, finally delivered, that the pattern is breakable. Deb couldn't break it. Harrison does. That's what the franchise was building toward. Across all those years of watching a woman get slowly taken apart by loving the wrong person. And since we're talking about people who suffered for knowing Dexter, let's talk about the people at Miami Metro who spent the entire run almost catching him. Because there's quite a lot to say about who came close, how close they got, and why it never quite worked. The Miami Metro Homicide Division is, and I say this with genuine affection, the least effective investigative unit in the history of fictional American law enforcement. They have a forensic blood spatter analyst who is also a prolific serial killer working in their office and processing evidence from his own crime scenes for years on end without anyone definitively catching on. That is a sustained institutional failure on a fairly impressive scale. But when you look carefully at the reasons it happens, who almost catches him and why they don't, the show is doing something more interesting than just keeping the protagonist out of jail. Theory 41. James Dokes was right about Dexter long before anyone else at Miami Metro. His read was correct, his evidence was circumstantial, and the fact that he's dismissed as aggressive and paranoid is the show's darkest joke. Dokes watches Dexter from the beginning. He finds Dexter's energy wrong. He clocks the things that don't add up, the behavior around crime scenes, the looks, the pauses, the way Dexter moves through the world with just slightly too much composure for someone who claims to be a mild-mannered forensics technician. His instinct is accurate. His proof is non-existent. And because Dokes delivers his suspicions in the register of hostility rather than professional concern, he calls Dexter a creep motherfucker to his face, which is accurate but not procedurally useful. Nobody takes him seriously. The show is quite deliberate about this. The person who sees correctly is coded as the problem. Theory 42. If Dokes had gone to Lundy in Season 2 instead of pursuing Dexter personally, the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation resolves completely differently. Dokes drives out to the Everglades alone. He confronts Dexter at the cabin. He allows himself to be trapped. He's then framed for the murders and killed in the explosion Lila orchestrates. None of this happens if Dokes takes his evidence, whatever he's accumulated, to Frank Lundy through proper channels. Lundy is intelligent and methodical and would have known what to do with it. But Dokes chose personal confrontation over institutional process. It's a realistic decision for his character and a catastrophic one. The Bay Harbor Butcher investigation failed not because the investigators were incompetent. It failed because the one person with real suspicion operated outside the system that might have actually acted on it. Theory 43. Maria LaGuardia's sustained campaign to prove Dokes was framed is the most heroic arc in the entire series, and it gets her killed. LaGuardia is a complicated character. She's ambitious, she's politically calculating, she plays favorites, she makes enemies for reasons that aren't always principled. The show gives her plenty of moral complexity that isn't flattering. And then it gives her this: a renewed investigation pursued against institutional resistance, personal cost, and professional risk, because she was convinced that a man she cared about had been falsely accused. She never wavers. She gathers evidence methodically. She pursues the truth even when every person above her tells her to leave it alone. And she dies in a shipping container, shot by the sister of the man she was trying to expose. LaGuardia is the show's moral, purest character when it counts, which is interesting given that she's often not its most morally flattering one in the day-to-day. The show seems to understand that moral courage isn't the same as moral consistency. You can be a difficult person and still be the one who does the right thing when it matters most. That's quite an honest observation. Theory 44. Frank Lundy's profile of the Bay Harbor Butcher in Season 2 was the most accurate criminal analysis in the show. He got everything right. He just never put a face to it. Lundy's read that the kill has a twisted set of principles, that the kills are methodical and purposeful and reflect a coherent moral framework rather than simple predation, is correct in every meaningful detail. He identifies the code without naming it. He identifies the vigilante dimension. He understands that he's not looking for someone enjoying violence, but for someone using it as a tool within a belief system. In a different story, Lundy solves the case in Season 2. In this one, the evidence doesn't attach itself to the right name before circumstances remove him. Theory 45. Quinn's storyline in Season 5, hiring Stan Liddy to surveil Dexter, is the show's most realistic depiction of how Dexter could have been caught. Not through brilliant detective work or forensic analysis, through a disgruntled ex-cop with a camera, following a hunch, sitting outside apartment buildings, taking photographs. Low-tech, personal, motivated by jealousy and suspicion rather than professional process. Liddy gets close enough to photograph Dexter moving a body. He has evidence. He dies before he can do anything with it. Dexter kills him in a moment of genuine desperation, and Quinn, who later gets drawn into Liddy's surveillance, is left without the thing he was looking for. The whole thread is then quietly dropped, but the method is the most plausible threat the show ever constructs, precisely because it bypasses all the institutional protections the code is designed to manage. Theory 46. The bloodslide La Guarda finds in Season 7, the one Dexter dropped accidentally at the church, is the most satisfying piece of evidence continuity in the franchise. It connects the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation, which ran in Season 2, to the Season 7 finale, through a single object Dexter mishandled under stress 5 seasons earlier. La Guarda doesn't find it through brilliance. She finds it because the forensic evidence was there, waiting, and she was looking in the right place at the right time because she'd never stopped believing Dokes was innocent. The bloodslide is also, metaphorically, the bloodslides, the whole collection, the whole record of what Dexter has done, coming back in miniature to demand a reckoning. The show has good instincts for this kind of thing when it's working well. Theory 47. Miami Metro's collective blindness to Dexter isn't primarily a plot convenience. The show is making a point about social trust and institutional immunity. People who work alongside someone, who see them at the coffee machine every morning, who attended their wedding and held their baby, they build a kind of immunity to suspicion that no amount of circumstantial evidence easily penetrates. The code's greatest protection was never Dexter's procedural care. It was the fact that his colleagues liked him. In any real investigation of this kind, and security researchers who study insider threats make this point consistently, familiarity and trusted access make insider threats significantly harder to recognize. We believe the person we know can't be the person we're looking for. And yet Miami Metro had more than enough information to raise serious questions about Dexter across several seasons. They chose, without quite choosing, not to follow those questions. The show is quite honest about this. Institutional trust is also institutional blindness. Theory 48. Angel discovering the truth and choosing to pursue it in Resurrection is the most satisfying long-game payoff in the franchise. Batista has been in the background of all of it. The Bay Harbor Butcher case, La Guarda's death, which he knows something was wrong about but couldn't prove. Dokes' reputation destroyed and then tentatively restored. If anyone in the Miami Metro universe has earned the right to finally close the case, to be the one who finishes what Dokes started and what La Guarda died pursuing, it's Batista. He's been carrying pieces of this story for the entire run of the franchise. The fact that Resurrection gives him that role is, whatever else you think of the show's decision to continue after New Blood, genuinely the right creative choice. Theory 49. The 3-question test. How many walkers have you killed? How many people have you killed? Why? Wait, wrong show. Dexter's informal screening of people who come into his orbit, assessing their dangerousness, their honesty, their potential for exposure, operates as a kind of shadow investigation mirroring the processes at Miami Metro. He's running his own background checks, making his own risk assessments, deciding who is safe and who is a threat. The difference is that where Miami Metro is trying to determine guilt, Dexter is trying to determine usefulness. He built a parallel institution, a one-man intelligence operation staffed by himself, operating inside the system he works for, turning its tools toward opposite ends, which is, when you look at it that way, quite remarkable. Theory 50. The reason nobody catches Dexter across the original run isn't incompetence or luck. It's complicity, the organized, ongoing, largely unconscious complicity of people who benefit from not knowing. Matthews actively suppresses the investigation. Deb actively manages evidence. Quinn backs off when he gets too close. Even Lundy's death, which removes the one investigator with the full picture, conveniently removes the one investigator with the full picture. The show's implicit argument is that institutions protect what they've invested in. Miami Metro invested in Dexter Morgan, his work, his competence, his role. Harry invested the entire protective framework of a police officer's network in Dexter's safety. And the people who threatened that investment, Dokes, La Guerta, paid the price. Not because anyone planned it that way, because that's how complicity works. It doesn't require conspiracy. It only requires the right people to look away at the right moments. Now, let's move away from the investigation and into something quieter. The actual symbols and rituals of what Dexter does, the kill room, the plastic wrap, the blood slides, because the show embeds quite a lot of meaning in the physical details of Dexter's process, and most of it rewards close attention. One of the things that separates Dexter from other crime dramas of its era is the degree to which the show invests in visual and symbolic language, images and objects and recurring motifs that carry meaning across seasons without ever being pointed at directly in dialogue. The blood slides, the plastic wrap, the kill room specific choreography, the ocean, these things are doing work in the background of every episode, and it's worth spending time with them. Theory 51. The blood slides are the show's real MacGuffin, not any specific killer, not any investigation, but Dexter's need to make what he does feel real and meaningful. The box of blood slides hidden in the air conditioning unit is what everything circles back to. Every season, the slides are at risk. Every season, protecting them is among Dexter's central concerns. And the reason they're so important is not evidentiary exactly. Any competent forensic analysis would reveal what they are. But they're not directly traceable to individual victims without enormous additional work. The reason they matter is psychological. They are Dexter's proof that it happened, that each kill was real, that each person existed and was removed from the world by his hand, that his work was done and done specifically. They're a record, an autobiography, hidden in an air conditioning unit that nobody else is ever meant to read. Theory 52. The opening title sequence is one of the greatest pieces of visual misdirection in the history of the medium, and it changes completely depending on when in the series you watch it. Dexter's morning routine, the shoelace catching on a fingernail, the floss, the egg, the bacon, the coffee, the shaving, all photographed in the specific register of unease, where every ordinary action is reframed as something more deliberate, more practiced, more charged. On first viewing, it tells you something is wrong about this person without telling you what. On a rewatch, after you know everything, it reads differently. The breakfast is not threatening, the man is. And the routine, the precise, repeated routine, is the same quality of attention and preparation that goes into a kill. The mundane and the violent are, for Dexter, structurally identical. The title sequence understood this from the first episode, Theory 53. The kill room's physical state tracks Dexter's psychological state with remarkable consistency. When Dexter's in control, emotionally stable, methodically prepared, operating from a position of certainty, the kill room is clean. The plastic is smooth and well anchored. The tools are laid out properly. The ritual proceeds in order. When he's unraveling, grieving Rita in Season 5, panicking about Deb's discovery in Season 7, rushing because circumstances are wrong, the kill room reflects the disruption. The plastic sags, steps are skipped, things go sideways in the room before they go sideways elsewhere. It's a barometer. Watch the kill room season by season and notice how the physical space changes. It's one of the show's quietest pieces of visual storytelling. Theory 54. Dexter's pre-kill rituals function as a form of compulsive behavior that the show frames as judicial process. But there's a gap between those two things that the show never fully closes. The research, the evidence gathering, the confrontation where Dexter shows the target their own crimes, the table with the photographs, the ritual statement before the kill. This is structured to look like due diligence, a process that separates Dexter's kills from random violence. And in most cases, it does serve that function. To be fair to the show and to the code, the vetting is real. The confirmation of guilt is genuine. Dexter doesn't kill arbitrarily, and the rituals enforce that discipline. But the rituals are also compulsive. In any real legal framework, none of this evidence gathering would be admissible, and none of the confirmations of guilt would constitute proof in any context that matters. The code is not a court. It's a reassurance system. The rituals are about Dexter's need for the kill to feel justified, which is different from the kill being justified. The show conflates these two things through the rituals. Noticing the conflation is the beginning of a more honest reading of what the code is actually doing. Theory 55. Killing Jonathan Farrow, the one provably innocent of murder person Dexter kills, is the show's most honest moment about what happens when a code meets human error. Jonathan Farrow, the fashion photographer whom Dexter targets in Season 4 as a suspected murderer, turns out to be innocent. His assistant committed the murders. Dexter killed the wrong person. And the code, elaborate, detailed, procedurally rigorous, has absolutely nothing to say about this. There is no protocol for regret within the code. Harry didn't build one in because Harry designed the code to prevent error through careful vetting rather than to handle error after the fact. The slide for Farrow's blood is the first one Dexter breaks on screen. He can't file this one under the usual structure. The system worked as designed and produced a catastrophically wrong outcome. That's not a bug. It's the reveal of a fundamental limitation that was always there. Theory 56. Dexter's choice to dispose of his victims in the ocean is the show's quietest piece of biographical symmetry. His mother's murder happened at a port. He was found in a shipping container surrounded by water and blood. The ocean isn't just a convenient disposal site for a man who owns a boat. It's where Dexter returns his dead. He sends them back to the place that made him what he is. The show never says this explicitly, but the image of Dexter at sea in the dark, releasing body parts into deep water, it's connected to the image of a 3-year-old boy in a container with his mother's remains in a port in water. Everything circles back to water. The ocean keeps his secrets and mirrors his origins. That's the kind of symbolic structure that's either quite deliberate or the universe being tidy. Theory 57. Blood is the show's central symbol, and it operates on at least 4 distinct levels simultaneously. And the show never makes any of this explicit because it doesn't need to. Forensic evidence, Dexter's professional domain, the surface he operates on every day. Family connection, born of his mother's blood, Harrison found in Rita's blood. Guilt, the blood that won't wash off, the blood that ends up on surfaces it shouldn't be on. The blood that connects him to every victim. And heritage, the blood of killers, the blood of trauma, the blood that runs through generations whether you want it to or not. These meanings operate together in every episode. and the show layers them without commentary. Blood is always all of these things at once. That's what makes the opening title sequence so effective. It's not just unsettling, it's dense. Theory 58. The title of the original series finale, Remember the Monsters, is borrowed from Harry and Dexter's childhood and retroactively means something different by the time you get there. Harry used the phrase to explain the code. There are monsters out there and someone needs to deal with them. That's the original context. By season 8, episode 12, the monsters being remembered are different. It's Dexter the show is asking us to remember as a monster, except that's not quite what happens. He survives. He drives into a hurricane and he survives. The title is a question the finale asks and then declines to answer. Remember the monsters? Here's the thing about monsters. Some of them have very good survival instincts. Theory 59. The improvised kill room in New Blood, broken glass for a blood slide, a woodshed, old plastic, is the show's most quietly alarming image of what suppression actually does and doesn't do. Dexter has spent the better part of a decade as Jim Lindsay. He doesn't kill, he manages the urge, he goes to work, he has a girlfriend, he goes to bowling nights, and then the moment the conditions are right, the white deer killed, the rage activated, the target available, he can construct a kill room from whatever's at hand in minutes with the same procedural completeness as always. Nearly a decade of abstinence and nothing has been forgotten, nothing has faded. The compulsion doesn't atrophy, the skill doesn't rust. New Blood's most quietly disturbing argument is not that Dexter is dangerous, it's that suppression isn't recovery. The car is still in the garage. The engine still turns over on the first try. Theory 60. The ocean as destination and origin is the show's structural metaphor for what Dexter's life is. A loop between the place he came from and the place he sends everything he destroys. He was found in water. He hid his victims in water. He drove into a hurricane and, as it turned out, survived. Water is the element of his origin, his concealment, and his near destruction. That's not incidental. The show's most iconic visual is Dexter on the slice of life at night, dumping body bags into dark water. And that image connects directly to the shipping container at the port. The loop was always going to close eventually. New Blood brings him back to solid ground, where Harrison finds him in snow, another water in its solid form. Even the geography of the ending is consistent with the show's elemental logic. Let's shift from symbols to people, specifically to Rita Bennett Morgan, who is one of the show's most under-theorized characters, possibly because she dies at the end of season 4, and the conversation about her tends to stop there. It shouldn't. Rita Bennett is one of those characters that the show's mythology tends to flatten into a role, the wife, the cover story, the sacrifice at the end of season 4 that breaks Dexter open. And she is all of those things structurally, but Julie Benz plays her with a warmth and specificity that the mythology underserves. And there are theories about what Rita knew, what she felt, and what her presence in Dexter's life actually meant that are worth spending time on. Theory 61. Rita was not a cover story that became a real relationship. She was a real relationship from the beginning, and Dexter couldn't bring himself to acknowledge it. The show's framing in the early seasons, Dexter tells us he chose Rita because she was unlikely to want physical intimacy, given her history with Paul Bennett, which meant less performance required, presents the relationship as strategic, convenient, a useful component of the cover story, and yet. In season 1, during a confrontation with a victim on his table, Dexter says he cares about Rita, and the show captures his surprise at his own words. He didn't intend to say it. He wasn't performing for anyone. He was alone with a dead man, and he said something true. The relationship was real before Dexter was willing to admit it. The cover story came first. The feeling arrived without announcing itself. Theory 62. Rita's acceptance of Dexter's darkness, the NA story, the weirdness, the distance, was not naivety. It was a considered choice by a woman who knew exactly what it looked like to love someone with something wrong at the center. Rita had Paul Bennett for years. She knew what it looked like to live with a man who had something deeply dangerous underneath the surface. She'd learned to read the signs, and the theory, which I find quite compelling, is that Rita was not fooled by the NA story. She knew there was something more. She'd made her peace with not knowing what it was, because she trusted that Dexter, unlike Paul, was not a danger to her or the children. She chose love over complete understanding, which is a choice many people make, and not an unintelligent one. It just turned out that what was underneath was considerably more extreme than the version she was privately accommodating. Theory 63. Rita's death in the Season 4 finale is structurally the most earned death in the series. It is entirely a consequence of Dexter's specific choices. Dexter had multiple opportunities to kill Trinity before the night Rita died. It happens late in the season when he first captures Arthur Mitchell, later when he understands fully what Trinity has done and is still doing. He delays each time because he's fascinated, because Trinity represents something he wants to understand, because studying Trinity feels like studying himself in some essential way. This is the Code's greatest failure. It has no provision for what happens when understanding a target becomes more important than eliminating one. Dexter chose curiosity over the Code. Rita died because of that choice. The show makes this completely clear, and it makes Dexter live with it, and it makes us watch him live with it. That's honest. Theory 64. Harrison found sitting in Rita's blood on the bathroom floor is the show's most deliberate structural callback, and it's deliberate specifically because it was chosen over dozens of other possible images. Dexter at age 3 found in the shipping container in his mother's blood. Harrison at approximately 8 months old found in the bathtub in his mother's blood. The images are exact mirrors. The show could have structured Rita's death differently. Trinity could have killed her somewhere else. Harrison could have been elsewhere in the house. The choice to recreate the specific circumstance of Dexter's origin trauma with his own child as the central figure is conscious and precise. The franchise was always going to eventually be about what this does to Harrison. New Blood is the reckoning with that. The bathtub image is the planting of the seed. Theory 65. The disappearance of Aster and Cody from the narrative after Season 5 is one of the show's most complete and inexplicable emotional abandonments. Rita's Children by Paul Bennett were part of Dexter's family for 4 full seasons. Cody called him Dad. Aster was protective of her mother, suspicious of Dexter, then warming to him over time. They were not present at Rita's death or anywhere near it. They knew Dexter as a stepfather. After Season 7, in which they appear briefly, traumatized, and staying with grandparents, they are essentially erased, referenced occasionally in dialogue to confirm they exist, but effectively absent from the story. The show decided it couldn't handle their continued presence and couldn't figure out what to do with them, so it quietly moved them off screen. It's one of the more dishonest things the series does emotionally. Real families don't conveniently disappear when they become structurally inconvenient. Theory 66. Hannah Mouquet works as Dexter's most compatible love interest, specifically because she removes the performance requirement entirely. With Rita, Dexter performed. He performed connection, domesticity, emotional availability, ordinary human warmth. And the performance generated something real eventually. But it was always a performance at the base. With Lumen, he shared something true, his real self. But Lumen's dark passenger was temporary and circumstance dependent. It faded when its cause resolved. Hannah is different. She knows what Dexter is. She's a killer herself, operating from her own entirely personalized moral logic. She doesn't need Dexter to perform for her. She doesn't need him to be anything other than what he actually is. And the show's depiction of their relationship is consequently the most relaxed Dexter ever appears in a romantic context. The relief of being known. The specific rest of not having to pretend. Theory 67. Every woman Dexter loves is destroyed or removed by the end of her arc. And the show is aware of this as a pattern, even if it never explicitly names it. Rita, murdered. Lila, murdered by Dexter. Lumen, she leaves, which is the show's kindest exit for a female character, and it still feels like abandonment. Hannah, carried through the original series all the way into the finale, which gives her a proper resolution. The pattern is consistent. Women who enter Dexter's orbit either exit through violence or disappear. The exception is Deb, who is present for the full run, and who has destroyed the most thoroughly of all over the longest period of time. The show doesn't comment on this. It doesn't need to. The pattern is legible. Theory 68. Dexter's happiest moments across the franchise are consistently domestic and specific, and this is the show's quietest argument that what he wants is not the killing. It's the ordinary life. Pancakes for the kids, boat trips with Harrison, the Keys honeymoon that Rita dies before they can take, the morning routine, the office coffee, the moments where nothing dramatic is happening and Dexter is just present in the world he built for himself. These are not performed contentment. They're not strategic. The show is careful about the difference between Dexter's performed normalcy, his social face, and these moments, which occur in private or near private, and involve pleasure that isn't being curated for anyone else's consumption. Dexter wants the ordinary life. He just also has the dark passenger, and the two things don't coexist peacefully. And the franchise is the story of what happens when they collide. Theory 69. The Keys honeymoon that Dexter promises Rita, sending her ahead with Harrison while he stays behind to finish dealing with Trinity, is the show's most precise image of what the dark passenger costs. He sends Rita ahead. He needs one more day to resolve the Trinity situation. One more day becomes forever. Trinity kills Rita before Dexter arrives. The Keys honeymoon becomes the defining absence in the show's middle act, the thing that was almost and then wasn't. And it was caused not by catastrophic failure or unforeseeable circumstance, but by Dexter choosing to delay. One more day. The distance between the life he wanted and the life he had was, at that specific moment, measurable in hours. That's the show's darkest arithmetic. Theory 70. There is a persistent fan theory that Rita was beginning to suspect Dexter before her death, and the evidence for it is genuinely worth examining. In Season 4, Rita confronts Dexter repeatedly about his behavior, the car accident, the arrest, the demons he describes to her in the car ride home. She says, in that car ride, sometimes I'm just going along and everything seems okay, and then this darkness creeps in and it takes over. And Rita says, that makes you sound crazy, and then says she doesn't believe he is. The theory reads her denial not as genuine disbelief, but as a woman choosing not to follow a thought to its conclusion. Rita had the instincts. She'd developed them with Paul Bennett. The theory is that she was approaching something she couldn't name but was beginning to sense, and that her death foreclosed the possibility of what she might have eventually figured out. It's unverifiable. But it changes the Season 4 Rita scenes on rewatch, and I think it makes the character more interesting, not less. Now, from the domestic world of Dexter's Miami life to the cold of upstate New York, where the franchise picked back up 10 years later. New Blood is a divisive piece of television. Let's spend some time with the theories around it, because I think it's more coherent than it gets credit for. Dexter. New Blood arrived in 2021, 8 years after the original series ended, and it had the particular challenge of following up an ending that almost nobody liked. The lumberjack finale, the hurricane, the inexplicable survival, the beard. New Blood had to contend with all of that and also tell a new story that could stand on its own, and I think, and this is not a universally shared opinion, that it largely managed it, not without problems, but more coherently than its reception suggested. Theory 71. New Blood is not a sequel, it's a reckoning. The original finale was the show refusing to commit to consequences. Dexter survives. He hides. He grows a beard and chops wood in a remote lumber yard and calls it penance. New blood is the consequences arriving, not as punishment from the universe, but as the logical human extension of Dexter's choices, specifically the choice to abandon his son. Harrison tracks him down. Everything Dexter thought he'd outrun is standing at the door with a bus ticket and a backpack full of unresolved trauma. The reckoning was always going to come. New blood is just the vehicle it arrived in. Theory 72. Harrison's self-harm scars are the franchise's most precise image of inherited damage, not genetic predisposition, but trauma transmission. Harrison didn't inherit Dexter's urge to kill. He inherited Dexter's pain disconnected from its source. The self-harm is Harrison hurting himself the way Dexter hurts others, to feel something real, to manage internal pressure that has nowhere to go, to create a controllable wound when the uncontrollable wound is too large to approach directly. The show handles this carefully. Harrison is not coded as a potential serial killer because of the scars. He's coded as a young man who grew up without a father and with a very specific kind of wound, and who found the only way he could to manage it. The inheritance isn't the dark passenger, it's the hole where a parent should have been. Theory 73. The white deer in New Blood is the franchise's most carefully constructed symbol since the Bloodslides. Dexter has spent 10 years not killing, he runs in the snow, he goes to bowling nights, he has a girlfriend and a job in a bait and tackle shop. And in the woods, he's been watching a white deer, rare, beautiful, visible evidence of something pure in a world that keeps disappointing him. The deer represents the peace he's been constructing for himself, the control, the almost convincing quietness of Jim Lindsay's life. And then Matt Caldwell shoots it, and it sprays Dexter with blood, and the piece shatters in the most literal possible image. The darkness comes back not because Dexter summoned it, but because someone else introduced blood into his field of vision. That's the show saying the dark passenger was never truly dormant. It was waiting for a condition to be met. The condition was always going to be met. Theory 74. Kurt Caldwell is the antagonist New Blood specifically needed, a man who has been killing for 25 years in the same small town without detection, while being beloved and prominent in the community. Kurt is what Dexter would have been without the code and without Harry and without Miami Metro's forensic database to give him access to victim histories. A killer who selected his victims, young women, usually hitchhikers, based on simple availability and a particular psychology, not ethical framework. He has a bunker, he has trophies, he's been at it for a quarter century, and the town loves him. He's the local bar owner, the well-liked community member, the man who keeps a photo of his son on the mantelpiece. In a show about whether the code makes Dexter better than the alternative, Clancy Brown's Kurt Caldwell is the alternative. No code, no Harry, no redirect. Just uncontained violence doing what uncontained violence does across decades. Theory 75. Angela Bishop is the LaGuardia figure of New Blood, and her survival is the show retroactively correcting one of the original series' most troubling choices. Angela makes the connection between Jim Lindsay and Dexter Morgan, between Dexter Morgan and the Bay Harbor Butcher, between the Iron Lake disappearances and a broader pattern. She pursues it against institutional skepticism and personal cost. She uses her access to the ketamine evidence and the bone screws from Matt Caldwell's remains, and a reference to Bay Harbor Butcher victims having ketamine in their systems that she finds through online research. She's doing exactly what LaGuardia did, and she survives. LaGuardia died because she got too close to the truth about a man the institution had decided to protect. Angela gets close to the same truth and lives. The show was giving the archetype a second chance, and Angela's survival is the clearest evidence that New Blood was paying attention to what the original series did wrong. Theory 76. Harrison's decision to shoot Dexter at the end of New Blood is the most morally coherent act in the franchise. Dexter has killed Logan, a man not on any version of the code, a genuinely innocent person who was doing his job. He killed him in a cell by snapping his neck because Logan wouldn't give him the keys to escape. Harrison discovers this. Harrison knows who his father is by this point. He knows the dark passenger is real. He knows about the code. And he has seen with his own eyes the moment the code failed, the moment his father killed someone who didn't deserve it to save himself. Harrison's response is not impulsive. He asks Dexter to turn himself in. He gives him the option. Dexter declines. And then Harrison does the thing Deb could never do. He ends it, not because he wanted to, because he understood that it wasn't going to stop any other way. Theory 77. New Blood's finale is the only Dexter ending that makes thematic sense. This remains an unpopular opinion, and I understand why, and I stand by it anyway. The original series finale asked us to accept that Dexter Morgan could disappear into a forest and grow a beard, and that this constituted consequences. It's an ending that declines to be an ending. New Blood provides the actual ending. Dexter is killed by the person he hurt most, whose life he most profoundly shaped, whose damage he most directly caused. Harrison shoots his father. The cycle ends. Harrison survives. The ending is appropriate because it's proportionate. The damage Dexter did most deeply was to his son, and his son is the one who closes the account. That's not a comfortable ending. Comfortable would be Dexter getting away with everything again. Comfortable was the lumberjack. Theory 78. Deb appearing as Dexter's hallucination in New Blood instead of Harry is the single clearest creative statement the show makes across its entire run. Harry represented the code, the rationalization, the permission structure, the organized voice that said, "You're doing fine, you're following the rules." Deb represents consequence. She appears in New Blood wounded, frustrated, not quite forgiving, and she absolutely does not give Dexter permission to do anything. She argues with him. She challenges his reasoning. She asks about Harrison repeatedly. She's not the ghost of a mentor. She's the ghost of someone who loved him and paid the price. The show was finally putting the right voice in the right place. Deb should have been there all along. Theory 79. Harrison's dark passenger, as depicted in New Blood, is fundamentally different from Dexter's. And the difference is the show's most carefully structured argument about what the inheritance actually consists of. Dexter's compulsion is solitary, ritualistic, controlled, predatory. He selects, he plans, he executes in specific conditions. Harrison's, to the extent that New Blood depicts it, is reactive, protective, socially directed. The school stabbing incident in which he violently attacks Ethan in a staged confrontation is the clearest image of this. Harrison's violence responds to other people's pain. It's not hunting, it's intervention. This is a meaningful distinction, and the show is precise about it. If Harrison has inherited anything from Dexter, it's the capacity for violence in service of something, not the appetite for it in isolation. Theory 80. New Blood's most optimistic claim, buried under the snow and the grief and the difficult ending, is that the cycle can actually break. Harrison is the test case. He has the same origin wound as Dexter. He found his father. He came to understand what his father is. He has a dark passenger of his own kind. And he chooses, actively, painfully, with full knowledge of what it costs him, to act rather than protect, to hold accountable rather than conceal. He breaks the pattern that Deb couldn't break. The franchise took 15 years to say this plainly. But here it is. The cycle is not inevitable. It requires the next person to make a different choice. Harrison made the different choice. It's the saddest and most hopeful thing the franchise has done. And since we're in the territory of newer material, let's talk about Original Sin and what the prequel series does to everything we thought we understood about the mythology. Because Original Sin, whatever its other qualities, fundamentally changes the shape of the story. Original Sin is set in 1991 Miami, following a young Dexter in the period when the code is being constructed. Patrick Gibson plays the young Dexter, and Michael C. Hall provides the internal monologue voiceover, adult Dexter, narrating the past. Christian Slater plays young Harry. Sarah Michelle Gellar shows up as the chief of forensics, which is a casting choice that I personally find quite delightful for reasons I'll get to. The prequel format gives the show access to something the original series never quite managed, showing us the ground floor construction of everything that subsequently defined the franchise. Theory 81. Original Sin retroactively makes the entire original series a story about a single question. Was Harry's decision the right one? Before Original Sin, the code's origin was largely handled in flashback within the main series. Brief, selective, emotionally loaded. Original Sin shows us the negotiation, Harry arriving at Vogel with a problem he can't solve, Vogel providing a framework, Harry adapting it. Dexter being used as a subject without full consent. He was a child after all, and the code wasn't something he was asked to choose. You watch the prequel with the full knowledge of what the code produces across the original run, and a revival, and the question that sits underneath everything is, given all of that, given Rita and Deb and La Guerta and Dokes, and the whole long trail of consequence, was this the right decision? The original series never quite commits to an answer. Original Sin makes the question inescapable. Theory 82. Christian Slater as young Harry Morgan is casting that communicates before it acts. Slater has a specific screen quality, charming, capable of warmth, with something slightly unstable beneath the surface, capable of charisma that tips into something you can't quite name. It's the quality that made him interesting in the 90s, and that has stayed with him. That quality, applied to Harry Morgan, tells you immediately who this man is. A police officer who genuinely loves the damaged child he's been handed. Also a man who will look at that child's psychology and see a project. The warmth is real. The willingness to use it is also real. Slater doesn't have to work hard to communicate both simultaneously. He just exists on screen and you get it. Theory 83. The framing device of adult Dexter narrating Original Sin means we're watching the 1991 story filtered through a serial killer's self-justification. Everything we see is Dexter's version of events. The internal monologue in the original series is Dexter's perspective on the present. The internal monologue in Original Sin is Dexter, decades removed from the events being depicted, with full knowledge of how they turn out, narrating his own origin story to himself. He's not lying, necessarily, but he's selecting, he's framing, he's choosing which details to give weight to and which to pass over. The Harry we see in Original Sin is the Harry Dexter needs to remember, shaped by 40 years of what came after. I find that genuinely disorienting once you sit with it. We think we're watching the past. We're watching Dexter's autobiography. The prequel is showing us the past and Dexter's interpretation of the past simultaneously, and those two things are related but not the same. Theory 84. The shipping container scene, shown in more detail in Original Sin, recontextualizes what happened to Brian M.O.E. Zare in a way the original series never quite managed. We knew from the original series that both boys were in the container. We knew Harry retrieved Dexter. We didn't quite see the full texture of what that night was from inside it. Original Sin shows us more of the specific horror, the chainsaw, the mother, the particular circumstances in which two small children were left with the result of a cartel killing. And in seeing it more fully, you see more clearly what Brian lost when Harry chose Dexter. The container produced both of them. Harry's choice determined which version of the container's product would be channeled and which would be left to manage the unmanageable alone. The ice truck killer is the shipping container's other product, unassisted. That framing, once you have it, changes how you watch the season 1 finale entirely. Dexter kills his brother in that finale, but what he's really cutting loose is the version of the container that nobody caught. The version that never got a code, the version that was just left to become whatever the damage wanted it to become. Theory 85. Sarah Michelle Gellar appearing in Original Sin as Tanya Martin, Chief of Forensics, is a casting choice doing more than one thing at once. On the surface, a legacy guest star for Showtime's prestige prequel, generating attention and goodwill. That's real and obvious. But Gellar, as Buffy Summers, spent years being the face of television's most iconic monster fighter, a young woman defined by her proximity to darkness and her ability to survive it. Placing her now in a universe full of monsters that never get caught, in the institutional setting where the evidence of those monsters is processed and mostly misread, it's either a very funny coincidence or a wry meta joke about what forensics looks like when the real monster is on the staff. I don't know which. I enjoy it either way. Theory 86. The fact that most of the original series was filmed in Los Angeles, standing in for Miami, is one of the production details that most clearly rhymes with the show's central theme. Dexter's Miami, the pastel houses, the palm trees, the bright Florida light, the Latin music, the bay, is almost entirely artificial. A residential neighborhood in Long Beach, California, dressed to feel like something it isn't. It looks like the real thing. It functions like the real thing. Nobody on screen seems to notice the substitution, which is, of course, exactly what Dexter himself is. A constructed environment designed to pass as authentic. The show was filming itself in the most appropriate possible location. There's something quite pleasing about that, once you know it. The city that looks like Miami but isn't, populated by a man who looks like a normal person but isn't, made by a production team that was perfectly aware of both contradictions and let them sit beside each other for 8 years without comment. Art imitating theme, imitating production, the layers go all the way down. Theory 87. The shift from Sony F900 HD video in seasons 1 to 2 to newer digital camera systems from season 3 onward produces a subtle textural change that tracks with Dexter's psychological arc, whether intentionally or not. Season 1 has a grain to it, a slight roughness, a quality of danger embedded in the visual texture. Starting in season 2, the image is cleaner, more polished, more easily readable. And Dexter in season 2 is someone who has just survived the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation, who has re-established his cover, who is entering a slightly more settled phase, for now. The film to digital transition tracks the psychological shift, however accidentally. Rough and dangerous to smooth and functional. The danger is still there, it's just better concealed. Theory 88. Michael C. Hall's diagnosis with Hodgkin's lymphoma, kept secret during the filming of season 4 and treated immediately after it wrapped, adds a layer to the Trinity arc that cannot be separated from the performance. Hall has spoken about this. He was in treatment while playing Arthur Mitchell's antagonist, a man confronting mortality, ritual death, the cost of living inside darkness for decades. Season 4 is widely considered the best season of the series, and Hall's performance as Dexter engaging with Trinity is widely considered the best work in the run. The context doesn't explain the quality, but it isn't separate from it either. Hall was, at the time, a man thinking about death with unusual clarity. He was playing a man in a sustained conversation with someone who had made peace with death in the most brutal way imaginable. The performance has a weight to it that doesn't come from craft alone. Theory 89. The Jeff Lindsay novels eventually gave the Dark Passenger a supernatural dimension, a literal spirit entity, and the TV show was right to refuse this entirely. In the later Lindsay novels, the Dark Passenger is treated as something genuinely external, not a metaphor, not a psychological construct, something that inhabits Dexter from outside. Other characters in the books have their own passengers. It becomes a paranormal element of the universe. The TV show rejected this from the beginning and held to the rejection all the way through. The explicit conversation between Dexter and Harry's ghost in season 7, maybe the Dark Passenger is just a feeling, is the show planting a flag. It's internal, it's psychological, it's a story Dexter tells himself. That decision is one of the best creative choices the adaptation made. A supernatural dark passenger would have given Dexter a genuine external cause for his behavior and dissolved the ambiguity that makes the character interesting. Theory 90. Resurrection's choice to bring Dexter back from the dead, revealing he survived the gunshot wound, is the franchise's most fraught creative decision, and whether it works depends entirely on what they do with the survival. New Blood's power came from consequence. The ending was real. Harrison shot his father. Dexter died. The cycle ended. If Resurrection simply brings Dexter back because the character is profitable and the ending was unpopular, if it's a reversal rather than a continuation, then it undermines everything New Blood was trying to say. If it treats the survival as Dexter being given one more chance specifically to face something he couldn't face in Iron Lake, to pursue Harrison, to finally be accountable in a way the lumberjack beard never required, then it might justify itself. The jury, as I understand it, is still deliberating, which is perhaps a good sign. Shows worth watching tend to keep you uncertain about whether they're going to do the right thing. And now we're in the home stretch, the final 10 theories. These aren't really about individual characters or plot threads. They're about the whole thing, what Dexter is saying, what it's always been saying, why we watched it for so long, and what it means that we did. These are the theories that live underneath the plot, the ones that don't require you to know specific episode details, though knowing them helps because they're about the structure of the show's argument rather than its individual moments. Take your time with these, or don't. Or either way, I'll be here. Theory 91. Dexter is a show about how we construct narratives to explain why we're the good guys. And The Dark Passenger is Dexter's version of a story every human being tells themselves. The Dark Passenger, the code, the victims who deserved it. The justice the system failed to deliver. These are stories, specifically structured stories that position the narrator as necessary, as doing what others won't, as burdened and heroic rather than simply violent. Every person who has ever done something harmful has a version of this, a framework that makes the behavior legible within a self-image that tolerates it. Dexter's version is more extreme than most. The mechanism is the same as everyone's. The show's slow accumulation of cost, the people who die because of Dexter's mythology rather than despite it, is its argument that the story doesn't survive contact with reality. The story holds. The damage accrues anyway. Theory 92. Every season finale asks the same question, can Dexter stop? And every season premiere answers no. The show is a loop, and the loop only breaks when someone else breaks it. Season 1 ends with Brian dead and the code intact, Dexter choosing the structure over the connection. Season 2 ends with Dokes framed and dead, the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation closed. Season 3 ends with the partnership dissolved and Dexter alone again. Season 4 ends with Rita dead and the price paid and Dexter still standing. Each time the equilibrium reasserts, each time the loop closes and reopens. The question is posed again. The answer is the same, and yet the show keeps asking it season after season because the asking is the point. In any real psychological framework for understanding compulsion, the loop is the characteristic feature. The loop doesn't break because the person inside it decides they want it to. It breaks because something external changes the conditions. Harrison changes the conditions. That's not a criticism of Dexter, it's an observation about systems. Systems that produce suffering tend not to terminate themselves. Theory 93. The code is the show's extended metaphor for moral relativism, a system of ethics that serves its creator rather than any universal principle. Harry built the code to manage a specific problem: his culpability in creating Dexter's trauma, his desire to protect the child he loved, his need to keep Dexter from exposing Harry's own professional exposure. The code was calibrated to Harry's guilt. It was then handed to Dexter as though it were a universal ethical framework. And Dexter treated it as one, followed it, enforced it, even tried to share it with Miguel Prado. But a moral framework built to serve one man's specific needs is not a moral framework in any general sense. It's a rationalization in procedural clothing. The show explores what happens when you try to run your life on that. The answer across the whole run is it works until the context changes and then it fails catastrophically, and the casualties are the people who trusted you. Theory 94. The show's treatment of vigilante justice is ultimately critical rather than celebratory. It just does the criticism very slowly and very quietly, so that you're complicit in the rooting before you realize what you've been rooting for. This is the show's most impressive achievement and its most ethically interesting maneuver. You root for Dexter, every viewer of the show roots for Dexter, at least initially, and most of them keep doing it even when the evidence against him accumulates. You root for him because you see the world through his eyes, you understand his logic, you know his victims are guilty. And then, gradually, the camera pulls back slightly. You see Dokes, you see La Guerta, you see Deb. You see the cost of your rooting accumulate in the bodies of people who did not deserve what happened to them. The show doesn't tell you to stop rooting for Dexter, it just makes the cost of rooting for him increasingly visible. And by season 7, if you're paying attention, you're uncomfortable with yourself in a way that feels like it was engineered. It was. Theory 95. Dexter Morgan was told what he was before he was old enough to decide for himself. And the show's deepest tragedy is that he believed them. Harry identified him as a killer in waiting at 3 years old. Vogel confirmed it. The code was built around a diagnosis delivered to a traumatized toddler by adults who had their own reasons for the diagnosis. And Dexter, throughout the original series, inhabits that identity completely. He doesn't question whether the story is true. He tries to manage the story, work within it, redirect it. But he accepts its premise. He was told what he was. He became what he was told. New Blood, with Harrison refusing the same foreclosure, making different choices, finding different expressions for whatever he inherited, is the show asking what might have happened if the 3-year-old had been given a different story to live in. The answer isn't clear, but the question is finally being asked. Theory 96. Deb's arc is the show's most honest thing. And it says something that most prestige dramas aren't willing to say about loyalty. We talked earlier about Deb being the show's true protagonist, the character who actually changes while Dexter loops. But there's a specific dimension to that worth pressing on here. Deb's arc doesn't move toward redemption or earned wisdom or any of the terminal points we expect from protagonists. It moves toward depletion. And the show doesn't frame this as tragedy in the operatic sense. It frames it as consequence. The narrative tracks Deb's destruction as the logical result of a specific choice she kept making, the choice to stay close to Dexter, which means the show is saying something that doesn't get said often enough in this genre, that loyalty to someone who cannot be saved is not heroic. It's a slow erasure. Deb didn't fail to save Dexter, she succeeded in loving him. And in this story, those two things were always indistinguishable. Theory 97. Every villain Dexter encounters represents a different answer to the question, what does violence look like without the code? Brian M.O.E. Zare, violence as self-expression, as communication, as art. Lila, violence as passion, as the ultimate intimacy. Arthur Mitchell, violence as compulsive ritual, as biographical reenactment without ethical structure. Miguel Prado, violence as personal power, as the use of justified killing to settle unjustified grievances. Travis Marshall, violence as religious submission to an authority that doesn't exist. Oliver Saxon, violence as pure negation, the absence of any framework at all. Each antagonist is the same question in a different form. Who are you, Dexter, if you remove the code? And the show's running answer, illustrated villain by villain, is that the code is not what separates Dexter from his victims in any absolute sense. It's what separates him from each of them specifically. Take away the code and replace it with nothing, and you get Saxon. Replace it with grief, and you get Mitchell. Replace it with love, and you get Lila. The code is the only particular thing holding Dexter Morgan in a particular shape. Without it, he becomes whoever his circumstances need him to be. Theory 98. The blood slide box is the show's real MacGuffin, more than any specific killer, more than any specific investigation. Everything the show is about lives in that box, not as evidence, not primarily as trophies, as record. Dexter is the only living person who knows whose blood corresponds to which slide. When he dies, at the end of New Blood, that information dies with him. The box and what it contains and what it means and the entire private history of what Dexter did and why he did it and what it cost, it all disappears. Nobody gets to read the autobiography. Nobody gets to know the complete account. That's not presented as tragic in the show, but I think it is, slightly. Not because Dexter deserves to be known, because the record of what he was, the full record with the complexity and the genuine care and the genuine horror all together, dies without a reader. The box is the show's image of a life lived entirely inside a room with no door. Theory 99. The show never demonstrates that the code makes the world safer. It asserts this. It doesn't prove it. The utilitarian premise of the code, that Dexter kills people who would otherwise kill again, so the net result of his existence is fewer total deaths, is stated often and examined almost never. We see Dexter kill people who were guilty. We see him kill several innocent people. We see Lila kill Dokes, who was not guilty of anything relevant. We see the deaths caused by protecting his secret, Dokes and LaGuerta, with Deb and Logan dying as indirect consequences of his actions. We are not shown the deaths prevented. We don't see the future victims who didn't die because Trinity was killed by Dexter before he could kill them, or because Dexter gets to other killers before they can claim someone new. We take the prevention on faith because the narrative asks us to. The show is more honest than it appears to be about the fact that it's asking us to take it on faith. It just never draws the explicit conclusion. It's asking us to notice the gap. Theory 100. Dexter is not a show about a serial killer. It's a show about a man who was handed a story about himself before he was old enough to question it, who lived inside that story for his entire adult life, and whose son, at the end, chose a different story. That's what the franchise has always been about. The dark passenger, the code, the blood slides, the kill room. These are all components of an identity constructed for Dexter Morgan by other people, by Harry's guilt, by Vogel's research, by Brian's existence as the alternative, by the shipping container that started everything. Dexter didn't choose to be what he is. He chose repeatedly to remain it. That's the distinction New Blood is interested in. Harrison also didn't choose his origin. He also didn't choose the damage. But he chose at the end not to carry it forward in the same form. He made a different choice in the same impossible situation. That's the franchise's most complete statement. Not about serial killers, not about vigilante justice, not about Miami Metro's investigative procedures. Though we've spent a lot of time on all of those tonight, the franchise is, at its core, about whether the stories we're handed at the beginning of our lives have to be the stories we live all the way to the end. Dexter believed they did, Harrison disagreed, and the show, after 15 years, and a revival, and a prequel, and a franchise that is still going, finally came down on Harrison's side. And that's 100, every single one. If you're still awake, I honestly don't know what to say. Either you're a more dedicated Dexter enthusiast than I am, or you're fundamentally not sleepy. Or you're one of those people who listens to these videos with the specific intention of absorbing everything, which I genuinely respect. Either way, thank you for being here. If you fell asleep somewhere around theory 40 or 60 or 80, that's fine. That was the whole point. The video will be here. Come back for the ones you missed. There are no cliffhangers. You didn't miss a reveal. It's just someone thinking out loud about a show they spent too long considering, and you can dip in and out as you like. What I find myself returning to after spending all this time with these theories, and I've been sitting with this show for quite a while now in various ways, is how much it manages to be about. It's about trauma and what it produces. It's about the stories we tell ourselves and the price those stories extract from the people around us. It's about fathers and daughters and sons and what gets passed down through families that nobody named it in time to redirect. It's about justice and the gap between what institutions call justice and what individuals are compelled to pursue in justice's absence. And it's about the impossibility of being fully known and the desperate human need to be known anyway. Dexter wants connection more than almost anything. He wants someone to see him whole, and the code guarantees that no one ever will, because the code was built on a foundation of concealment. That's the contradiction Harry built into the system. You can be safe or you can be known. Not both. Not ever. But Harrison chose differently. He found his father. He saw him whole, eventually. He knew exactly what his father was. And he made a decision that Dexter never could have made because Dexter was too inside the story to see it clearly. Harrison could see it. Harrison was outside it, looking in. And that outside perspective, the perspective of someone who was damaged by the story rather than the one telling it, turned out to be the only view from which the ending was visible. That's what the whole thing was about, I think, all of it. Every season, every villain, every kill room and bloodslide and pancake breakfast and boat trip in the dark. It was about whether the story can change, whether the person living inside it can find a way out, or whether it takes someone on the outside to open the door. Wherever you are tonight, whether you're in bed and drifting, or on the sofa under a blanket, or somewhere entirely unexpected, I hope this was a comfortable way to spend a few hours. I hope the theories gave you something to turn over quietly in your mind, which is precisely the right thing to do when you're trying to sleep. Nothing urgent, nothing unresolved, just the pleasant weight of ideas that don't demand anything of you. Sleep well. We'll do this again.